Hello, welcome to the Commercially Savvy Lawyer. My name's Sonya Shaykhoun, and I'm the Commercially Savvy Lawyer. I'm a New York qualified lawyer and the owner of the law offices of Sonya Shaykhoun, Esquire, here in Manhattan. About 6 months ago, I was on LinkedIn and I participated in a conversation with a contact of mine who's a recruiter. He had posted that he wanted some recommendations for some books about being commercial, because he was working with a partner who was lamenting the fact that some of the junior lawyers he worked with really didn't have a clue. So because I'm a transactional lawyer with more than 17 years of international, often cross-border experience, I had a huge aha moment, and I got to work writing The Commercially Savvy Lawyer, which I'm still writing, and putting this group together to share ideas, hacks, knowledge, expertise, to and potentially learn from you as much as you will hopefully learn from me. I have a BA in Arabic and law from the School of Oriental and African Studies, which is a very small and prestigious college at the University of London. I have an LL.M. in corporate and commercial law from SOAS. I did the legal practice course in London at BPP Law School. And more recently, I did another LL.M. in corruption law and governance at the University of Sussex and the Rule of Law and Anti-Corruption Center in Doha, Qatar. I have worked in Bahrain for 7 years, from 2004 to 2011, and in Qatar for 8 years, from 2011 to 2019. I work for Orbit Communications Company, which is now OSN, a Pan-Arab satellite company. I work for Charles Russell Speechlys. It was Charles Russell then, in Bahrain. And then I work for Al Jazeera Media Network, supporting the group of companies underneath it and a global network of bureaus around the world, and Qatar Airways, also in Qatar, where I was in both the contracts department and the compliance department. So I'm probably an expert twice over, because for sure I've drafted more than 20,000 hours worth of contracts of all values, of various levels of complexity, from zero level to multi-billion-dollar level of contracts, values, complexity, usually by myself. I don't tend to, when I was in-house, I didn't tend to rely on outside counsel, because I know how to write a contract. And I am really a consummate commercial, transactional lawyer. And I've worked with lawyers from all over the world, from big law to small companies and all around the world. So it's just the nature of the experience I got. I started out in Bahrain. I was a senior legal counsel. I had some idea of what it was like to draft contracts, because of the legal practice course I'd done in London. But my boss at the time gave me a stack of contracts, shoved me out of his office, and told me, go study these, and that's how you learn how to contract. So I'm self-taught, and but also learned an awful lot on the job. I have huge experience, and I'm now happy to share that with you, and hopefully to learn from you as well. So the first hack is, you've got your contract, now what? Okay, so in the past, I would have been present at big presentations if the contract was part of a big project, or dealing with an individual commercial person, where I would sit in on a call or sit in on a meeting and listen and take copious notes, and then follow up with emails and questions for the commercial person or people after the fact. And then I would get the draft eventually, and I would print it off typically, or look at it on the computer, it doesn't really matter, and start reviewing that very quickly, just to see any potential red flags, things that might need work, deeper review, and that might be red flags or duplicative or against company policy or. But the first thing you really need to pay attention to is the top part of the contract. So this is very rudimentary, but you'd be surprised how many people screw this up. Because, people are in a rush to get their contracts done. They focus so much on the more technical bits, the pricing, etc. But you really need to get it right at the top. So we're going to title the contract, and I've included a slide to show you what that might look like. And it will be centered, and you can make it all caps or sentence case. It doesn't really matter. Bold it, and it could be a service contract, barter agreement, whatever. Contract, you've got the title. Then you go back down underneath the title, and you write this service contract. Let's say it's a service contract, okay? This service contract, and then you define it, because you don't want to keep repeating service contract through your 30-page contract, okay? You need to keep it brief and simple. So now you've got service contract. We're going to define our first defined term, parens, quote, contract, capital C, and the rest of the word, close quote, paren, and bold that. So now you have your first defined term that every time you use the word contract, you're going to use it capitalized like that, but not bold, okay? This contract is made on the 6th, I'm British trained, so I use a British date, but so it's the 6th of October. You would say this 6th day of October 2021, or if you're in America, then you would write this contract is made on October 6, 2021. And now you have an opportunity to define your second defined term, which is the execution date. So this is the day one of reviewing the contract. Obviously, October 6th is not going to be your execution date. So leave it blank, but highlight it in yellow or whatever color you want to highlight it in. So when you get to execution, you don't forget to date it, because if you don't date the contract and you've referred to the execution date as the date above and there's no date there, you are in trouble. You don't know when your contract starts, and wow, you've messed up. So sometimes you can kind of figure it out from the date of the signatures at the bottom, but you really shouldn't put yourself in that position. So put the date or highlight it so you don't forget, and then you define execution date in the same way as you defined contract. So I'll show you in the slide, but just paren, quote, execution, capital E, bold, date, capital D, date, and quote, close paren. By in between, and then you go down, and I tend to indent the parties, but you don't have to. I mean, you develop your own style. Number 1, let's say it's me, the law offices of Sonya Shaykhoun, Esquire, or Sonya Shaykhoun, law offices of Sonya Shaykhoun, Esquire, a sole proprietor, whose registered address is blah, blah, blah. Then I would define that in the same way as I've defined the other terms as Shaykhoun law to make it brief. So now every time you refer to me, in the contract, you will refer to me as Shaykhoun law. Paren, quote, capital S, Shaykhoun, capital L, law, bold, quote, paren. And then do the same for the second party. It's really important to do your due diligence on the other party. Typically, parties they may send over their incorporation documents, but I like to do my own due diligence. I like to ask for incorporation documents to make sure that the representative is who he is supposed to be, and that the company is in fact in good standing and not bankrupt. And maybe it's my Middle East experience or a lot of chancers who will try to contract with you, and they're actually frauds, and you may find yourself with a case of the Emperor's New Clothes 6 months later if you don't do this vital but very simple step at the early stages. The final thing that I would do at the top is define the parties. So you don't, some people don't like to define parties, but I like to do it. Okay, so this is what I do. I say each party, lowercase p, shall be referred to as the party. And you can do it in either order. You can put the party first or the parties. So the party, no parens here, just quote, party, capital P, bold, quote, individually, and the parties, capital P, quote, capital P, parties, bold, quote, collectively. And then now you've got the top of your contract sorted because you've figured out what kind of contract you have. You've reminded yourself not that you have to date it when it comes to the execution. And you have defined the 2 parties or 3 parties. There sometimes are multiple parties, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll just keep the 2 parties. And you've defined party and parties. So that's the first the first tip. Don't mess up the parties and the hack and the date and the due diligence part. Super important, especially if you're dealing with people from abroad who you don't know. You may end up saving yourself a lot of trouble and litigation if you find out 6 months later that you've been contracting with fraudsters. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And if you have any suggestions for what I should be making videos about going forward, let me know. But I will be going through the contract terms in the immediate future, and looking forward to connecting with you in my LinkedIn group, The Commercially Savvy Lawyer. Thank you and good night.